My boyfriend mocked my stutter in front of his friends. I didn't break up with him. I waited until his big work presentation, then asked him a question in front of the entire board. I'm Claire, 28 female, and my hands were still shaking by the time we got back to his apartment that night. Not from cold, though Chicago in February is merciless, but from humiliation. Ethan, 30, my boyfriend of almost 2 years, had just done the one thing I always prayed no one outside my closest circle would ever do. He mocked my stutter. Not just a slip or a teasing joke between partners. He put on a full exaggerated impression of me in front of 4 of his work friends. It happened at O'Malley's, this dim, crowded bar they all loved after their Thursday trivia nights. I tagged along because Ethan kept telling me, "You need to meet the crew. They're like my second family." We were squeezed around a tall table, everyone halfway through their second round of beers, swapping stories about embarrassing moments at work. One guy, Matt, I think, told this story about accidentally hitting reply all to a company-wide email, and everyone laughed. Then someone nudged Ethan and went, "You gotta tell them about that meeting with Claire." I didn't know what they meant. I'd only ever visited his office once, months ago, to bring him lunch. But then Ethan grinned like the devil had just handed him a script. "Oh yeah," he said. "It was when Claire tried to ask my boss a question, and it came out like, and then he did it." He dragged out my words, stuttering on the same syllable 3, 4, 5 times, shaking his head like he was trying to dislodge the sound. The table erupted into laughter. Not polite chuckles, not awkward sympathy laughs. Full, loud, beer-spraying laughter. I froze. I've had my stutter since I was a kid. Speech therapy helped, but it never vanished. I've made my peace with it. Mostly. My friends, my real friends, know how to wait without making it a spectacle. But Ethan? He'd always told me it wasn't a big deal. He'd said it was cute, apparently cute enough to turn into a comedy bit for his buddies. I just smiled stiffly, cheeks burning, while my mind screamed, "Get out! Get out! Get out!" The rest of the night was a blur. I nursed my drink, pretending to check my phone, waiting for him to say we were leaving. He didn't even notice how quiet I was. On the Uber ride home, he talked about how everyone loved you, like we just had the perfect double date instead of a public shaming. Inside his apartment, I mumbled something about being tired and headed straight for bed. I stared at the ceiling for hours, cycling between embarrassment and rage. Every memory of him defending me to people, brushing off my stutter like it was nothing, now felt like a setup. I didn't break up with him. Not then. I decided right there in the dark that I wasn't going to just walk away. I was going to wait. Because Ethan had something big coming up. His annual work presentation to the board of directors. The one he'd been bragging about for months. The one where everything needs to be perfect because a promotion was riding on it. And if he thought making me a punchline was funny, well, I was about to show him what real timing looked like. The next morning, Ethan acted like nothing happened. He came into the kitchen humming, shirtless, flipping pancakes like he was auditioning for Most Oblivious Boyfriend Alive. "Last night was fun, right?" he said, sliding a plate toward me. "They all said you're adorable. I think Matt has a crush on you." I wanted to say, no, Matt was laughing at me like I was a sideshow act, but I just mumbled, "Yeah," and picked at my food. See, Ethan had this aura. People gravitated to him. He was the kind of guy who could charm your parents in 5 minutes flat and convince a bouncer to make an exception when the bar was full. When we first met, that charisma was magnetic. I liked how sure of himself he was, how he could walk into a room and just own it. But over time, I started to realize his confidence wasn't always harmless. Sometimes it bled into arrogance, and when he was in a crowd, forget it. He needed to be the funniest, the loudest, the most entertaining, even if that meant stepping on someone else to get a laugh. It wasn't the first time I'd felt like the punchline either. There'd been little moments, him imitating the way I said certain words, doing mock announcer voices when I got stuck on a syllable. I'd brushed it off. He doesn't mean it, it's just his sense of humor. But the bar incident ripped the blindfold off. He did mean it, and in front of his friends, he liked how it made him look. The thing is, Ethan could also be incredibly sweet in private. The week after the bar, he booked us a weekend trip to Galena, saying we needed to relax. We went antique shopping, shared wine tastings, even stayed in a bed and breakfast with a ridiculous canopy bed. And part of me thought, maybe I overreacted. Maybe he just misjudged the moment. Then, Sunday night, as we were unpacking, his phone buzzed. I didn't mean to snoop, but his screen lit up with a group chat, the group chat, with Matt and the others. And right there, in the preview of the latest message, was a gif of some cartoon character stuttering. Ethan had reacted to it with 3 crying, laughing emojis. That's when I knew it wasn't over for him. It was still a joke, and that's when my plan shifted from vague, get even, to very, very specific. See, Ethan's job at Ashland and Burke wasn't just a paycheck, it was his identity. He was a senior account manager gunning for a promotion to director. Every conversation we'd had in the last month circled back to the board presentation coming up in April. He'd already picked his suit, rehearsed his speech, even practiced answering hypothetical questions in front of me. He liked the idea of me being there for moral support, said it'd look good to have his smart, sweet girlfriend in the audience, and I thought, yeah, I can be there, right in the front row, and when the moment's just right, I'll raise my hand. Not to embarrass myself, but to make him feel exactly what it's like to choke on your own voice while every eye in the room is on you. Once I decided I was going to use the board presentation, I started paying closer attention to Ethan's work life than I ever had before. Not because I suddenly cared about account management strategies, but because I needed the rhythm, the pacing of how those meetings went, who spoke, who watched, how much control he actually had once he was in that room. Ethan loved rehearsing in front of me, loved having an audience. He'd pace the living room with his tie draped around his neck, clicking an imaginary slide remote, explaining projections like I was one of the board members. "Then I'll open the floor for questions," he said one night, leaning dramatically on the back of the couch. "That's where I can really show them I can think on my feet." I smiled sweetly. "Oh, so people can ask anything?" "Anything," he said, chest puffed. "I want them to. Shows I'm confident. Good to know." Meanwhile, things between us, well, they were steady on the surface. He still texted me good morning, still made dinner on Fridays, still kissed me goodnight. But every now and then, that smug little smirk would slip out when he caught me stumbling over a word. And I started noticing how much he performed for people. Not just his friends, but anyone who'd give him attention. One Saturday, we ran into a couple from his office at a coffee shop. Within 30 seconds, he was retelling the funny bar story right in front of me. This time, he didn't even try to mask it. He stuttered through the punchline while pointing his thumb at me. The guy laughed. The woman gave me that awkward half-smile people do when they're not sure if they should laugh. I excused myself to the bathroom just to keep from showing the pure venom on my face. It was then I knew I couldn't just wing it on presentation day. I had to be precise. Step 1. Make sure I was actually in that boardroom. Ethan had already suggested I take the day off work to be there, so that part was easy. Step 2. Figure out the perfect question. Something simple, on the surface harmless, but full of the kinds of words I knew he always tripped over when he was nervous. Words that would catch on his tongue, make his jaw tighten, bring that creeping flush to his cheeks. I started building a list on my phone whenever inspiration struck, pulling terms from his own field so no one could accuse me of trying to trip him up on purpose. And step 3? That was the real trick. I had to make it seem like the question came from genuine curiosity. No edge in my voice, no hint of payback. I wanted him, and everyone else in that room, to think this was just me being supportive. In the meantime, I kept up appearances. We went to trivia nights. We saw friends. I even laughed at his jokes, just enough to keep him comfortable. But under the surface, I was sharpening my blade. The week before Ethan's big presentation, his stress level went through the roof, which, honestly, was perfect for me. He was up late every night, pacing the apartment, muttering through slides, snapping at me if I so much as clinked a mug too loudly in the kitchen. His confidence was still there in public, but in private, I started seeing cracks. "You have no idea how much is riding on this," he said one night, after I asked if he wanted to take a break for dinner. He slammed his laptop shut so hard the sound echoed. "If I screw this up, I might as well kiss that promotion goodbye." I just nodded sympathetically, even reached over to rub his shoulder. Inside, I was thinking, good, be nervous. The Saturday before, we went to dinner with two of his co-workers, Amanda and Greg, at this overpriced steakhouse downtown. I mostly kept quiet, sipping my wine, letting the conversation wash over me, until Amanda asked if I'd be coming to the presentation. "Oh, absolutely," Ethan said quickly, putting his arm around me. "Claire's my good luck charm." Greg smirked. "Guess we'll see if she brings the magic." Ethan laughed. "Oh, she will. She always does." And then, he looked right at me, eyes glinting. "Maybe she'll even get a word in without, It was quick, almost throwaway, but I felt my nails dig into my palm under the table. Amanda's smile faltered, like she'd picked up on something ugly, but she didn't say a word. That moment, that was my confirmation. Whatever lingering doubt I had about whether this was too far evaporated. He was still using my stutter as a party trick, even days before the biggest moment of his career. The night before the presentation, he went to bed early. I stayed up, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, rehearsing my question in a whisper, making sure the words would sound casual, curious, innocent. The next morning, I dressed in my most professional outfit, not flashy, but polished enough to look like I belonged in a corporate boardroom. Ethan beamed when he saw me. "Perfect. You look like someone they'll listen to." If only he knew. At Ashland and Burke, I followed him up to the top floor where the conference room was. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive table, leather chairs that probably cost more than my car. The board members filed in, 8 of them, all middle-aged, all wearing the kind of watches you only see in magazines. Ethan took his spot at the front, laptop hooked to the projector, smile dialed to full wattage. I sat in the second seat from the end, right where he'd see me without having to turn his head too much. close enough to make eye contact when the time came. And as he started speaking, all that charm and bravado on full display, I thought, you're not going to see it coming until it's too late. Update 1. Wow, I didn't expect this to blow up the way it did. I posted this thinking maybe a handful of people would relate to having a partner who turns you into a joke. Instead, I woke up to 6,000 notifications and more DMs than I can count. Some of y'all went hard in the comments. My personal favorites. Put marbles in your mouth before you ask the question. Go full method acting. Tempting? But I want him to know it's me. Stone cold sober. Ask a question you know he'll mess up and then sit there with a smug face while he implodes. Oh, you're going to like what's coming. And my favorite unhinged one. Bring a strobe light. No, but points for creativity. A few people told me I should just dump him and not waste my energy. And listen, I get it. I know walking away is the mature, self-respecting choice. But here's the thing. Ethan lives for his public image, his job, his status, the way people at work look at him. It's oxygen for him. And I want him to feel that sudden drop when the air runs out. Also, to the couple of people who messaged me saying, maybe he didn't mean it, or it's just his sense of humor. I need you to understand this has been a pattern. The bar incident wasn't an isolated slip. It was the loudest example of something he's been doing in smaller doses for months. I've had strangers defend me more in a single awkward conversation than my own boyfriend has in 2 years. Right now, I'm sitting on my couch with a coffee, running through my plan like an Olympic routine. I know exactly what I'm going to ask. It's long enough to sound legitimate, technical enough to look like I'm really invested in his work, and just twisty enough that it'll catch in his throat. The presentation is in less than 2 hours. I already know where I'm going to sit. Second from the end, perfect sightline. I even practiced my tone in the mirror. Warm, supportive, but curious. I want him to thank me for asking it right before it all goes to hell. And when he does, when I watch that panic flicker behind his eyes, when I see that first bead of sweat, yeah, that's when I'll know it's worth every second I kept my mouth shut instead of walking out the night he made me a punchline. Wish me luck. I'll be back after the meeting. Walking into that boardroom felt like stepping onto a stage. The carpet was so plush my heels barely made a sound, and the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and printer toner. Ethan was already at the front, setting up his laptop, looking like he'd just swallowed a spotlight. He glanced at me and gave a wink, like we were in this together. My stomach flipped, but not for the reason he thought. The meeting began, and Ethan slipped into his performance mode. His voice was steady, his smile rehearsed, every gesture smooth. He clicked through charts and numbers with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this 100 times, which, to be fair, he had. But I wasn't watching the slides. I was watching him, waiting for that moment when his eyes scanned the room and landed on me. When it came time for questions, the CEO nodded toward the table. Any comments or clarifications for Ethan? I let 2 people go first. Softball questions about budget allocations and projected timelines. Ethan handled them flawlessly, even making the board laugh once. His confidence swelled. He was relaxed now. Perfect. I raised my hand. Ethan's face lit up like Christmas morning. Claire, he said warmly. Go ahead. I smiled, leaning forward slightly so my voice would carry. I was wondering, I kept my tone gentle, curious. Could you elaborate on how you plan to integrate the client's multi-sectoral cross-collaboration metrics with the upcoming infrastructure scalability benchmarks, especially considering the quantitative risk mitigation protocols you mentioned earlier? It was a mouthful, but all legitimate jargon I'd pulled from his own slide deck the week before. And I'd woven in 3 phrases I knew he always stumbled over when tired or nervous, because I'd heard him do it in our living room. The shift was instant. His confident posture stiffened. His jaw twitched. His lips parted, but nothing came out for a solid 2 seconds. He started, then tripped over multi-sectoral, stammering just enough for the room to notice. He tried again, but scalability benchmarks caught in his mouth like a fishhook. He laughed nervously, glancing down at his notes, but I could see it. The tiny tremor in his hand, the flush creeping up his neck. The board members stayed polite, but the air had shifted. They were leaning in, waiting for him to recover, and the longer it took, the heavier that silence felt. By the time he reached risk mitigation protocols, his voice had cracked twice and his pacing was gone. He rushed the ending, tripping over himself to move on, his face glistening with sweat. And then, as if the universe wanted to gift-wrap the moment, the CTO, one of the more intimidating board members, said, "That's actually a good question, Claire. Could you clarify the risk protocols for us again?" Ethan's eyes went wide. He had to do it twice. The second attempt was worse than the first. I sat back, expression soft and supportive, like I hadn't just surgically dismantled his entire cool guy facade in front of the people whose opinion mattered most to him. The meeting wrapped with polite applause, but there was no mistaking the subtle shift in the room. A couple of board members avoided looking directly at Ethan as they gathered their papers. One of them patted his shoulder with the kind of sympathetic half-smile you give someone who just tripped in public. I stayed seated while the others filed out, letting Ethan pack up his laptop in tense silence. He didn't look at me. His jaw was set so tight I could see the muscles twitching. When the last person left, he turned. What the hell was that? His voice was low, but sharp enough to cut glass. I blinked, feigning confusion. What? That question. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. You know I hate those long-winded... He stopped himself, glancing toward the door like someone might overhear. You made me look like an idiot. I tilted my head, letting my eyes go wide and earnest. I was just curious. It was from your slides. I thought you'd want me to engage. For a split second, I thought he might believe me. But then something in his expression broke. His face twisted, and he slammed his laptop bag onto the table so hard a pen rolled off and clattered to the floor. Don't play dumb with me, Claire. You've been pissed since that bar night. You think I didn't notice? You think I'm stupid? His voice was rising now, echoing in the glass and steel room. I glanced at the doorway. The receptionist was looking in from across the hall, brows furrowed. Ethan saw her too and bit down on his anger, shoving his laptop into the bag and yanking the zipper shut so violently the fabric puckered. Get in the car, he muttered. The drive home was suffocating. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white, taking turns too sharply. Twice I thought about telling him to pull over, but I didn't. I just stared out the window, heart pounding, pretending to be calm. The second we walked into his apartment, the mask came off completely. You humiliated me, he snapped, throwing his keys onto the counter so hard they slid off and hit the floor. Do you have any idea how that looked? I've been working toward that promotion for 2 years. And you, he jabbed a finger at me, his face red. You sabotaged me in front of the entire board. I took off my coat slowly, hanging it by the door. Maybe now you know how it feels. For a second, he just stared at me. Then he kicked the door so hard it rattled in the frame. You're unbelievable, he spat, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. You think this is funny? You think you're clever? He knocked a stack of unopened mail onto the floor and slammed his fist onto the counter. I didn't flinch. No, Ethan, I think it's fair. The look on his face told me I'd hit something deeper than anger, embarrassment, maybe even fear. And I knew right then, this wasn't over. Not for him. Update 2. Okay. So I didn't think I'd be back this fast, but apparently Ethan is incapable of letting things cool down for even 24 hours. First off, thank you to everyone who said, savor the moment. Oh, I did. Watching that little hiccup in his perfect presentation balloon into a full-on derailment? Chef's kiss. And for the record, yes, he did try to answer my question again later in the presentation. And yes, it was just as bad. But here's the thing. Ethan didn't just sulk, he exploded. We got home, and he went full Tasmanian devil in the apartment. I'm talking slamming drawers, knocking over a chair, muttering to himself about disloyalty, like he was auditioning for a bad mob movie. At one point, he actually said, "You've ruined my career," which, buddy, if your whole career hangs on a single question from your girlfriend, maybe it's not as solid as you think. And then, this is the kicker, he started calling people. His best friend Matt got a rant about how I ambushed him. His sister? Same thing. And I know this because he left his phone on speaker while storming around, so I got to hear her go, dude, she asked a work question? What's the big deal? But he didn't stop there. Oh no. He called Amanda from his office, one of the board members who'd been at dinner with us, and tried to clarify his answer to my question over the phone. I don't know what she said, but judging by the way he slammed his phone down after, it didn't go well. And then, around 9 p.m., he banged on my bedroom door. I'd locked it because self-preservation, and shouted, "You're going to apologize to me in person tomorrow, at work, in front of the team." I laughed so hard I think it made him angrier. So now we're here. He's stomping around the living room like a man possessed. I'm hiding in my room eating peanut butter straight from the jar, and my phone has been blowing up with texts from people he's apparently told. Half of them are you okay? And the other half are, what the hell happened? I'm fine. But I don't think Ethan is. He's acting like a man whose entire identity just took a direct hit, and instead of fixing the crack, he's trying to smash the mirror. And based on how he's behaving, I have a feeling the real meltdown hasn't even started yet. By the next morning, Ethan's anger had fermented into something meaner. He was already dressed when I came out of the bedroom, pacing with his coffee like he'd been up for hours. I meant what I said, he snapped before I even opened my mouth. You're coming to the office today to fix this. I laughed, assuming it was bluster. Not happening. His jaw tightened. You think you're funny? Fine. You want to play games? He grabbed his phone and started typing furiously. 10 minutes later, I got a text from Amanda. Amanda, one of the board members. Ethan just sent an all-staff email about you? My stomach dropped. I pulled it up on my phone. He'd actually hit reply all on a thread about yesterday's meeting, attaching a picture of us from some holiday party with the caption, "My girlfriend Claire had an interesting question during the board presentation. Ask her about it next time you see her." I felt the blood drain from my face. He wasn't just mad. He was trying to make me the office joke, and it didn't stop there. While I was still processing, my friend Rachel called. Claire, did you post something about Ethan on LinkedIn? What? No. Well, someone did. From your account. I scrambled to log in, and sure enough, there it was. A post, supposedly from me, gushing about Ethan's brilliant presentation and how I'd accidentally asked a question that stumped him. Because I was too cute to follow the slides, I could see the comments rolling in. Coworkers, acquaintances, even old classmates of mine, all reacting. That was the moment I realized. Ethan had my LinkedIn password. I'd logged in on his laptop once. I confronted him right there in the kitchen. Delete it. Now. He leaned back against the counter, sipping his coffee like we were discussing the weather. Why? Thought you liked being in the spotlight. My hands were shaking. You're making yourself look worse. People see through this. He slammed his mug down so hard coffee splashed over the counter. No, Claire, you made me look worse. I'm just evening the score. I stared at him, really stared, and saw it. He wasn't thinking about the board anymore. This wasn't about one bad presentation. This was about control, about him proving he could still make me small. And that's when I stopped arguing. I walked into the bedroom, grabbed my tote bag, and started packing. Not because I was leaving yet, but because I needed the essentials ready for when this blew all the way up, because I could feel it coming. He wasn't going to stop until he embarrassed me publicly, but he'd forgotten something crucial. I still had one last card to play. I didn't have to wait long for my opening. 2 days later, Ethan's team had their weekly all-hands meeting, a big, open-floor event with the entire office gathered in their main conference space. I knew because he'd bragged about it 100 times, saying it was where he set the tone for the week. So I showed up. I walked in during the coffee break, dressed like I was coming from my own meeting. Blazer, heels, hair perfect. A few people recognized me from the board presentation. I caught whispers, the sideways glances. Good. Let them watch. Ethan spotted me across the room. His face went tight, but he was trapped. Too many people around to start yelling. Claire, he said under his breath as I reached him, what are you doing here? I smiled sweetly. Making things right. When the meeting resumed, the director of the department, someone above Ethan, was giving a recap. Before we wrap, she said, does anyone have any final thoughts or questions? I stepped forward before Ethan could react. Actually, I have something to say. All eyes turned to me. I kept my voice warm but carried it across the room. I just wanted to clear something up. At the board presentation the other day, I asked Ethan a question from his own slides. I thought it was fair game. After all, he's been such a great communicator about his work with me at home. But I didn't realize until afterward that I'd accidentally picked the one set of terms he struggles with. I glanced at him, just long enough, which was my mistake. I've been on the receiving end of people making fun of the way I speak, and I'd never want to do that to someone else. It was quiet for a beat. Then, like clockwork, someone in the back chuckled. Not at me, at him. And then another laugh. And then it spread, soft at first, but undeniable. Because here's the thing. The only reason my statement landed was that half the office already knew Ethan's sense of humor with me. I'd been at enough dinners, enough post-work hangouts, to know he'd told plenty of people about my stutter. All I did was flip the light switch and let them connect the dots. Ethan's smile froze in place. That's not, he started, but his boss was already moving the meeting along. I walked out before he could follow, and I didn't go back to his apartment. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing. Texts from mutual friends, a couple from his coworkers. One read, he's melting down in the office, yelling at Greg. Amanda told him to take the rest of the day off. Another simply said, you broke him. I didn't respond. I poured myself a glass of wine, turned on some music, and for the first time in months felt my shoulders unclench. I didn't need to see the promotion go to someone else. I didn't need to hear about his reputation slipping. The look on his face in that room was enough. Because now, when people think of Ethan at work, they won't picture the charming, untouchable guy he pretended to be. They'll remember the man who choked when his girlfriend asked him a question, and the silence afterward that said everyone finally saw him for what he was.